Welcome back. I'm still with the religious leader and community activist Bishop Paul Verryn as we probe and discuss the nature of violence in our society, looking at the traumatic experiences that many communities go through and wondering whether we can heal from this trauma, Bishop. I mean, the nature of the violence takes various forms. We've mentioned some of the Muti killings. We've mentioned instances of rapes of young children. Also the incident of the killing of a young boy in Colini. But this violence takes place in homes, for instance, the high incidence of femicide. Teachers are scared of school children. You know, just give me other instances where you think things have completely broken down.
So a city decides that it needs to put in place a mall, and there are a whole lot of informal traders. Now, you must understand that probably an informal trader represents 3 or 4 households with children, and overnight their entire livelihood is demolished. There's a village in Marievale, for instance, where at 3:30 in the morning the army arrived, fully armed, and evicted people at gunpoint from their homes, and, well, the court cases have gone ahead. I've been into that community. There have been suicides that have resulted as just a sense of pointless emptiness in those communities. And I'm not just talking about black and white. I'm talking about a community leader in that same community. Towards the end of last year, his home was petrol bombed, and he buried his wife in February. So the incidents are various, and they come from the intimacy of our close relationships. I mean, the stuff that happens to women in terms of rape is staggering. It bespeaks a deep, deep dysfunction and pathology in our society. And I don't have to preach to you about the fact that an experience like that for a woman demolishes so much of her humanity that it takes years to repair. But to come back to your former question, I do think that there is opportunity for healing. The spaces where people can speak freely, where they can get their anger out, where they can be broken and weep without being humiliated, can create spaces for a new breath of air.
But it sounds to me like that can only happen if you've gone through the experience of violence yourself, firsthand. But there's what I would regard as the sort of residual effect of the incidents of violence, where you may not have been there, you may not have witnessed it firsthand, like the example we gave at the beginning of this discussion of the way Toriso Tamani was killed. A lot of people may not have seen such an incident before in their lives, and then they get traumatized by that, and they wonder what's happening. How can anyone heal from that, so that we don't even get to experience it firsthand?
Well, there are psychological phenomenon which speak about intergenerational post-traumatic stress. So I'll give you, if I can,
please,
a personal, almost silly example. So I was born 7 years after the Second World War. My father fought in the Second World War. And now that I understand some of the stuff, I, could understand what it was that as a tiny child I could pick up in this man and his relative brokenness. And I can still remember we had a whole set of encyclopedias about the war. If I looked at those encyclopedias, I couldn't sleep at night. And so clearly I had almost been infected by the profound demolition that he had been a part of in the Second
But
World War.
let me tell you a story differently then.
Yes.
The two years.
Yes.
I'm one of those that believed or thought that once we attain freedom and we have a constitution and we enjoy human rights, that somehow we will find it within ourselves to become a better people, build functional homes, functional communities, and dignified society for that matter, because of the many opportunities and the policies of free education and all of those things, that somehow they're going to make life easier and better for people. The freedoms that go with the media and so on. But they seem to be somehow not delivering the goods in that regard. Why?
Well, I should imagine it's because for so many people the trauma of poverty, the trauma of discrimination, the trauma of the fear of you could not have lived. Well, I don't think you could have lived through the apartheid era and not have thought there is a tidal wave coming our way, because we are creating such infected human relationships.
Yes.
You understand?
Yeah.
And one just doesn't waltz out of that kind of thing. You know, the issue of reconciliation, the issue of forgiveness is not just a matter of saying, I'm sorry. And yes, okay, thank you, you've forgiven me, and we move on. At some level, the issue of reconciliation means that you have to, if you've hurt me, you have to have the courage to face the implications of your damage.
Again, that incident of the school children. I saw the commentary in the media, social media, is that capital punishment must be brought back and that the harshest possible sentence should be given to those school children. What is your view of that?
And I'm probably very dogmatic about this. I do not believe that retaliation against violence is a solution in any way. Nobody wins. Nobody wins. The return of the death penalty will introduce a form of inhumanity back into this country. And at least, no matter how small the steps are that we have taken to rediscover our commonness, our Ubuntu, and I know that that word's been abused beyond, but at least we have taken some small steps, and we have had some considerable, let's please not go back to what I think is fascism.
Here's a point, and I want your views as a religious leader on this one. Again, notwithstanding the apartheid past and the traumatic experience of living under that kind of oppression, including the current situation in terms of violence at a personal level, I'm wondering why a lot of people seem to be joining what appear to be churches run by charlatans with fake miracles being performed, and people are joining these churches by their droves. I'm sure you've seen your own church empty up and wonder what happened to your congregants. Well, they've gone to the pastors who can resurrect people from the dead. Why is that? I mean, is there any spiritual shift or spiritual poverty, impoverishment that's taking place? What would persuade people to join these churches?
Well, I think maybe two or three things. I think one of the things is that there is clearly a spiritual malaise that is sweeping through this country. That's the first. The second is that I think that the mainline churches, let's call them that, are somehow not scratching where it's itching. In other words, my family is demolished by violence. And I go to church on Sunday, and there is nothing in that place that in actual fact gathers up my brokenness at all. So I choose something else that enables me to escape the reality. And so I do think, I mean, your question asks the whole religious community, not just the Christian community, Islam, Hinduism, and all the alternatives. We need to look very, very seriously at the fact that Marx raised many, many years ago. If religion is going to remain an opiate for the masses, It is really just an avoidance of the truth. And I happen to think that the churches need to institute non-violence training. So my anger doesn't get ignored. My conflicts are not packed up in a box and sent to Jesus, for instance. But I'm given practical, tangible, workable ways in which certainly I can deal with my anger, and my religion connects with it.
But here's another point then, Bishop. When people get upset, disappointed, they turn around and say government must intervene. And in the case of the churches, they say regulate them like they are in Rwanda or in other parts of the world, in Cuba, or banish them, send them into exile, those fake pastors and charlatans, or close the churches down, demolish them if you have to. What's your view?
Well, I think that there are certain instances where there is nonsense, and you've got to deal with nonsense. I do, however, think that to shift everything to the government is very problematic. It's like shifting everything to God. God is going to solve everything. God is not going to solve. Somebody once said to me, the questions that we ask God are the very same questions that God asks us. And so our religion is not meant to be a cop-out. In actual fact, our religion, our faith, is meant to engage us in all dimensions of life, radically, in my economics, in my healing policies, in my responsibilities in education, in every single field. Can you imagine if churches, for instance, and let's go to education. If churches started training parents to extend the school life of their children into the local home. You don't have to be a genius, but you can go through your children's homework carefully, and you can start recognizing that you are a critical part of their intellectual development.
And probably even their moral development, for that matter. And also the connecting with the family and understanding the role of a child as a member of family and what it means to be a parent when they get older. Bishop Paul Verryn, always a pleasure talking to you. I appreciate that you came and spent time with us here.
Thank you very much.
And shared your insights with us. Thank you. And that's all we have for today. Thank you for joining the Modise Network, and be sure to tune in again next week. From us, enjoy the rest of your day.